Nobody can stop me now.
G'day guys, and welcome back to the Hobby Hatch. This video is going to be a little different because this one's about big robots. And maybe you like the idea of having some tiny big robots of your own, but if you're like me, you might be stuck on the fence because the models are quite big, they're a little pricey, and I don't know if I do the paint job justice. And if you're stopping yourself from picking up one of these bad boys because you're not quite sure how to approach the model like this, or your beautifully assembled Titan has been sitting grey on the shelf for a while, then this is the video for you. In this video, I'll be tackling my first attempt at painting one of these behemoths, going through the challenges that I ran into, and how you can stop yourself from falling into the same pitfalls, whilst also hopefully teaching some easy ways to achieve effects like the plasma glow you glimpsed in the intro. So to get started, you'll need to prime your model, and your primer of choice is best chosen to complement your colour scheme. In my instance, I'll be spraying a pure white zenithal over a black primer base to establish light volumes early on. It's super important that I mention that none of the armour panels are glued on into this model yet, and even the weapons are magnetised so they can come off without too much difficulty. If you do want to do a zenithal like me, best to blue tack everything on so your zenithal's consistent over the whole model. Should also mention that the reason the model is looking a little cruddy because I was a bad boy and didn't check the outside humidity when I initially primed it black, so I had to strip it and start again. If you do want to get a zenithal effect, but don't have an airbrush like me, a great alternative is using a white rattle can and you'll be able to get a nice similar result. In this case, I directed the light source coming in from the top right and then flipped the model around and mimicked the same direction from the back of the model. Once the light volumes were established, I went about disassembling all the panels. I highly recommend this step if you're considering doing a bold trim colour. With the skeleton stripped down, I mounted each of the armour panels to a sheet of thick card, making sure I kept the different armour panels in specific positions so I didn't lose which side of the Titan they belonged to. Alright, now see, if you're following what I'm doing and you meticulously stuck down and catalogued all your armour panels to a card sheet, you can now forget about it, because we'll be moving on to the skeleton next. This is probably the quickest and least intensive part of the model, depending on how you'd like to paint it. For me, I decided to keep it simple. All the metal sections got hit with a few coats of dark grey, and from there, I gave all of the metallic sections a dry brush with a bright silver. This method gives a bit more of a muted metallic appearance, but it's simply my preference in this part. With the skeleton done for now, I moved back to the armour panels. This step is simply concerned with tinting the pre-shade I laid down before. Any sufficiently thin paint will work, and if you're using a brush to do the same, the main goal will be to keep your paints even across the whole panel so that there aren't any random dark spots. The Titan Legion I've chosen is Legio Volpa, a particularly angry Titan Legion who by the end of the Horus Heresy was worshipping Khorne, the god of war.
God, it's corn.
Their colours of choice are rust red and purple with bone trim. I've taken some liberties since rust can be anything from brown to red brown, so instead I used Khorne red. I sprayed a nice even spread of the panels red and then switched over to a nice rich purple for the remaining. I noticed on the official Legio Volpa artwork we can see these little bits across each armour panel. And so to get a similar effect, I ripped up a dry baby wipe and stretched it over the armour panel, and then using my airbrush, I sprayed a brighter red, which left a streaky, splotchy pattern, which I think turned out pretty nice. I then went ahead and masked off this panel for some hazard stripes. Again, I used my airbrush here, but masking tape and a careful dabbing with a sponge or brush will work nicely too. After the purple had a chance to dry, I performed the same method as before, instead using a saturated magenta to get the streaky splotchy effect. After that had dried, I peeled off the mask. I repeated the same method on all the armour panels to get them sufficiently splotchy, and masked and repeated the hazard stripes on the leg armour, calf armour, we'll say it's calf armour. I then started to work on the trim. Now this goes without saying, the trim takes ages to paint. There is an unholy amount of trim on these models, and of course I chose a Legion with bone as its trim colour, so I have a nice selection of white to off-white colours with terrible coverage to work through. That said, it is insanely satisfying to get this done, and with our tried and tested cardboard method, painting the trim wasn't too difficult. So I worked through my bony paints, giving the base layer 3 separate coats of Morghast bone, followed by 2 coats of Wraith bone, and finally an extreme highlight of ivory. I then just had to repeat the process another 33 times.
One eternity later.
Okay, so I might have lost my mind over the course of painting that trim, but damn, does it look good. I even went on Google Translate and picked out a sufficiently nerdy Latin name for this War Master, and landed on Canticum de Excidium, which even with my bot's pronunciation, Google assures me means the Song of Extinction, which I think fits the model well. If you fancy writing something on your models, and like me don't want to attempt it with a brush, consider using a pencil. That's what I did here, and it turned out not too shabby. Of course, it's important to note that this needs to be sealed under a varnish layer, so it won't rub off. Alright, we're in the home stretch now, and the last few things we need to do are the decals, the oil wash, and finally the effects like the plasma glow. So, after assembling the model and gluing all the armour panels on, I gave the entire model a coat of gloss varnish. I whipped out my set of Legio Velpa decals, then using Microset to position and Microsol to soften them, I put them on some key panels. I didn't really have much of an idea where these decals should go, so I kind of just put them where they looked cool. Another note, I know decals can be a little intimidating at first, but I wholeheartedly recommend giving them a go if you're interested. With the right tools, they're effectively just those temporary tattoos you used to get as a kid, and with a little bit of practice, you'll be slapping them on everything. I then worked on the oil wash. This was made with Winsor & Newton's Sansador thinners and burnt umber oil paint. If you're using any kinds of solvents for your oil or enamel washes, it's definitely a good idea to crack a window or wear a mask. Once the wash was mixed to a nice thin consistency, I slathered it all over the model, aiming to minimise the amount left on flat open panels. The gloss varnish will help to mitigate this, and gives the wash an easier time running into those recesses. A healthy amount of wash was also slathered all over the metallic skeleton. And any sections where I thought I went too heavy with the wash, I cleaned up with a Q-tip dipped in a little bit of solvent. Once everything had dried, I sprayed the whole model with a polyurethane matte varnish to kill back some of that gloss and protect the decals and oil wash beneath. And so, now the final thing we have left to do is the weapon glow effect. I'm no expert in this, but after scouring the internet and watching the pros do it, I've tried to condense the process down into some solid steps. I do use an airbrush for this technique, but I should mention the same principles will apply if you're painting with a conventional brush too. So first things first, you'll need a pure white colour to base coat any parts of the model you want the light emitting from. In this case, I've used a titanium white ink from Liquitex. Secondly, you'll need to use this white to give off the effect that the light is being cast outwards from the light source. I'm cheating here and using my airbrush, but you can absolutely use a dry brush to fade out the glow effect. The biggest advice I can give for this step, to really sell the effect, is to not push the light too far away from the light source. Keep it close by, and you should be set. The third step is to now tint our light effect with our colour of choice. In this case, I'll be using Athematic Blue contrast paint, but as long as you pick a sufficiently bright and thin or transparent enough colour, you can cater it to whatever plasma colour you'd like. I recommend using contrast paints for this, especially if you're using an airbrush. They're essentially made for tinting over white. The fourth step is to use some titanium white ink and run it along where we want the brightest part of our glow to be coming from. In this case, along the bottom of the plasma coils. Ink is essential for this step, as it'll run into the tiny recesses of the coils really easily. You can see that it also doesn't take very much to coax and blend it further up the coils. The fifth step is to run a fluorescent colour of your choice down the highest point of the coils. Since I'm after a blue plasma effect, I went with Fluoro Blue by Vallejo. The blue is layered on the top in 2 to 3 coats, since fluoro paints are notoriously transparent, and I made sure to blend it down to the brighter sections as I went. This sounds a bit more involved than it was, and I simply didn't wait for the ink to dry completely and mix the fluoro in directly on the model. The sixth step was to run a thin line of pure white acrylic paint down the brightest area of the coils. I then repeated these steps over every single one of the Titan's plasma coils and moved on to our final 7th step, highlighting some edge reflections. These were then painted with plain old white paint just over the edges that were directly adjacent to the coil. Any reflections that came out too bright were then tinted back with fluoro blue from our previous step. And there we have it. In just 7 steps, you too could have your own excellent plasma weapons. I then assembled the model and painted in some eye lenses, which I forgot to film, sorry. And finally, with the model now complete, I whipped up a simple base and it was onto the Glamour Shots.
Stay calm. Stay calm. Stay calm.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. As always, if you liked what you've seen, leave a like and subscribe for more. YouTube has been really bad at pushing my content out to subscribers at times, so don't forget the little bell icon if you don't want to miss an upload. Also, make sure to let me know if this video has inspired some Titan craft out of you, and leave it in the comment section below, as well as any questions or feedback. I endeavour to get back to each and every one. This video marks the 1-year anniversary for the Hobby Hatch, so a big thank you to everyone who's tuned in over the course of the past year. It's really meant a lot, and I can't thank you all enough for enjoying the projects that I've been pouring my heart and soul into. Anyway, thanks again for watching, everyone. Always more content to come, so stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.